So my co-host today is Rav Singh. He is the mover and shaker of the community initiative, A Little History of the Sikhs, which brings alive for me and you Sikh history in the streets and museums of London and in the rest of Europe. And I met Ranveer, or Rav as he is popularly called, earlier this year, and I was fascinated with the stories that he shared. It is my pleasure to introduce you to him. Welcome to the show, Ranveer. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and how you thought of starting A Little History of the Sikhs and what keeps you going.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. It really does feel surreal to be under the banner of the Sikh Foundation International. I've been a follower and a fan for most of my adult life. The story of A Little History of the Sikhs is actually a personal journey. It's of being a Sikh, but also being a Londoner through and through. However, as a Sikh, I don't fit that narrative of an NRI, having been born in London. But in London, with this appearance, no one ever quite associates you with being a Londoner. So the walking tours in London or the day trips that we do in the south of England and study visits across the UK and Europe are actually retelling personal journeys of finding my connection to our Sikh heritage, Sikh history, and ultimately Gurbani and Sikhi by initially walking those streets of London. Back to you, Benji. So if I go, should we go to the next? Yeah.
So this is amazing, Rav. Let's get the show on the road.
Yep, brilliant. So as I said, I'm a London-born Sikh and always lived, worked, and relaxed in London for all of my life. So with that brief, just a short video about the highlights of London streets.
Have you seen the old man in the closed down market, kicking up the paper with his worn out shoes? In his eyes you see no pride, and helplessly at his side, yesterday's paper telling yesterday's news. So how can you tell me you're lonely and say for you that the sun don't shine? Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of London, show you something to make you change your mind. Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of London, show you something to make you change your mind.
Welcome to the streets of London. So this is a governance map of London and shows you the historic city of London here in the centre. The city of London is surrounded by 32 boroughs that make up the whole of London, Greater London. And as that song detailed from Ralph McTell, the streets of London contain a wealth of stories, many of which can help you to change your perspective. In the west of London, we have the most famous part of London associated with Punjabi communities around the world. We have Heathrow Airport here, but very close by is the famous little town of Southall or Southall in the London Borough of Ealing. So that's in the west of London, which most communities associate with Sikhs in London. So I live in the east of London, over in this part, and in a borough called Redbridge. And we have a little part of Punjab here as well, but we call it Little Lahore down in the south of the borough near Ilford. It's called Little Lahore. And today's tour is going to take us through the centre of London here. Now, as I say on most of my tours, it's all about bringing the past alive, because we believe that the past is always alive if it is remembered, and knowledge has life and power as long as it is saved from human forgetfulness. Just moving on to our next one. So as I said, the tour is going to take place virtually today now through these boroughs in London. We're going to start in the west at Kensington and Chelsea. And close by to that borough is the famous Big Ben in London, in the city of Westminster. We'll go across the centre to the east of the city, where we have Tower Bridge around here, on the border with Tower Hamlets. And through that journey, we'll explore these museums. So we'll be visiting the Victoria and Albert Museum. We'll move across to the Museum of London, go to the Tower of London, and also pass by the Natural History Museum, and then end over at the Museum of London. So with that overview, we'll get started with our tour. So this is the original old building associated with the Victoria and Albert Museum in South Kensington. Now, the origins of this museum lie with the Great Exhibition of 1851, where Henry Cole, the museum's first director, planned this exhibition with Prince Albert, who was Queen Victoria's husband. Now, at the end of that exhibition, Henry Cole purchased many of the exhibits and started to form the first collections. Now, by 1855, those collections were housed here in this Brompton Park house, and this was extended to include refreshment rooms across the ground floor here. So you'll see those refreshment rooms all across the bottom, and then the collections were housed above. And on the 22nd of June in 1857, this was renamed the South Kensington Museum, and that opening ceremony was conducted by Queen Victoria. Now, by 17th of May, 1899, so we're looking about 42 years on, Queen Victoria was back, and she laid the foundation for this new extension called the Aston Webb building. Now, this occasion in 1899 was her last official public appearance, and it was announced on that day that the museum again was going to be renamed, but this time as the Victoria and Albert Museum. Now, if you look at the museum today, if we take a look at the museum today, it actually is very, very large. Here's that original building I showed you, the Brompton Park house. And then this extension was put on, and it's 12,000 square meters of space here, the Aston Webb building extension, just circled in red here. And around here, at the front of the galleries, we find the Sikh Kingdom Gallery. So when you come in through the main entrance and turn left, you end up in the Sikh Kingdom Gallery. And it's there, which we're going to look at some of the items housed there now. So as we go here, you'll find this item, which is one of the museum's most prized items, and it's the throne of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, described as the golden throne. Now, this throne is made of wood, but engraved in gold, and was crafted by a goldsmith by the name of Hafiz Muhammad Multani, sometime between 1820 and 1830. So it's during the height of the Sikh Empire, that period. Now, as you can see, it comprises of two lotus petal-shaped octagonal designs, and both elements having lotus flowers and these octagonal shapes are reflective of Mughal furniture. Now, in Europe, the royal furniture that we have is usually very simply gilded, and it creates the effect of gold without incurring that cost. However, this throne from the court of Lahore is covered in thick sheet gold and is heavily ornamented. Now, the throne was first displayed with other treasures at that exhibition I told you about earlier, the Great Exhibition of 1851, after it was taken by the British in 1849 on the annexation of the Punjab following the Second Anglo-Sikh War.
So, Rav, can I take
Yeah,
over?
it's back. Yeah, of course, of course.
Yeah,
Back.
so the V&A is indeed has a very impressive collection of Sikh art, probably one of the earliest museum collections in the world. And it is this collection that formed the core of the multimedia and hugely successful exhibit, The Arts of the Sikh Kingdoms, which was on in 1999. And when I was working on our book, The Sikh Art from the Kapani collection, it is then that I got a full appreciation of what it takes to put up a show like this one. And all the work, the networking, the contacts, meeting the people, raising the funds, doing the marketing, so much work goes into it. And for this show, it all started with Dr. Kapani, who is the founding chairman of the Sikh Foundation. And he contacted Susan Strong, who is the curator of the Victoria and Albert Museum, in early 1992, to see if it was possible for the paintings, the Sikh paintings, which had been catalogued and published by W.G. Archer in his book, if those paintings could travel to San Francisco for the first ever exhibit on Sikh arts at the Asian Art Museum. Now, that was not possible for whatever reasons. For the museum, it was too short a time. But what resulted from this relationship is best explained in Susan Strong's own words, which is published in our book, The Sikh Art from the Kapani collection. And I'd like to share a small excerpt from that with you. I quote, "In the months that followed, the proposal evolved into something larger and much more ambitious. Narinder looked ahead to 1999 and the 300th anniversary of the Khalsa. Perhaps we could do an exhibition to mark this instead. And 5 years later, The Arts of the Sikh Kingdom was opened at the V&A, unquote." This exhibit was a blockbuster show. It had over 500,000 people visit it across 3 cities. There was London, San Francisco, and Toronto. But the most important thing for me was that it inspired the Sikh youth, who for the first time were introduced to their arts and heritage in this unique manner. And this throne that you just showed today, Rav, was a highlight of that exhibit. And Rav, did you get to attend the exhibition when it was, or how old were you then?
Yes, so 1999 was interesting because that was the last year of my degree. And I studied actually at Imperial College London, which is opposite the V&A, and it's actually where Dr. Kapani did his first set of postgraduate studies after he arrived from India. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew that there was an exhibition on Sikhi opposite our university. And they approached our little Sikh society and they said, we need some help with volunteering. And so I used to sit at the front of the museum and just guide people as they came off the coaches, especially the Sikh groups that used to come from all over the UK. And my simple job really in Punjabi and English was just to guide them to the toilets. Gents on the right, ladies on the left. Hanji Penji, Kabbe passe do, and Hanji Sajje passe do. That's all I did for about 6 weeks with my books. So it was a good time.
That was your introduction too then, I think. So you were one of those youth that I talked about who were inspired by this exhibit.
Definitely.
And I believe that there are other versions of this throne as well.
Yes.
Do you know those, Rav? And are they in London or where are they?
Yeah, so we have replicas of this throne. So we have a wooden replica that's also held in the collections by the V&A. And I believe there's a second wooden replica, which is in a private collection. And after our tour earlier today, people have been sending me other replicas and other chairs and thrones across Lahore and other parts in India, all associated with Ranjit Singh. So, but for me, you know, this throne is a beautiful piece. It is part of the tours that we do in London for visitors who are first-time visitors to the V&A, and they are mesmerized by it. But when this object goes on tour, as you mentioned, it will go to San Francisco, it does go to Toronto and other cities. What's interesting is what they put in its place. Now, if we have a look at the next picture, which I'll just bring up on screen, and I'll just pin my video again. So if we have a look at this picture here, so this is a picture of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. It's in the Asian Art Museum, as you described, in the galleries of the Satinder Gaur Kapani collection. It's by the British artist Emily Eden, following her visits to India. And it shows Maharaja Ranjit Singh on this ivory chair. So when the throne actually goes on tour to other places, and it was in Coventry last year as well, I think, or the year before, and they actually put the ivory chairs on display instead. Now, I find these more of interest because they very rarely come on display, but they are very much associated with other images of Ranjit Singh. And I understand where he usually preferred to sit on his ivory chair. Now, so if we just move on now to other parts of the collection, I'll take you through this section here. The museum actually houses these fine examples of the stars. Now, the star on the left, it's dated from the mid-1850s, and the description reads, an Agalli turban, cotton wrapped over a wicker frame with quoits and other embellishments of watered steel overlaid with gold. Now, this version on the left is usually on display, but interestingly, they also have another fine example of a dastar, this second dastar on the right, a tall conical turban made of black cotton over a cane base, which is attached to a vertical spike and scimitar-shaped horns here. These horns and these 9 quoits around this structure, ring-shaped, sharp-edged steel weapons of various sizes. Now, the museum describes these turbans of being associated with Sikhs, known as Agallis, and members of this sect are also known as Nihangs, from the Persian word meaning crocodile, and Nihang and crocodile signify qualities of ferocity and fearlessness. And they describe the Agallis as being an order of armed fighters amongst baptized Sikhs. So we have the throne and we have the martial dastars, but we also have at the V&A these fine examples of Indian musical instruments. And this is an example of a Athos from 1882 from the collection of Carl Engel. And this comes on display on a rotation basis in the Indian classical instrument section. Now, this instrument, as many may be familiar with, sits on the floor with the upper end resting on the left shoulder of the musician who sits cross-legged. Now, the description describes the Athos as being emerging from the Punjab region and becoming popular in northern and central India. It's associated with Sikh devotional music, and many credit its invention to one of the great Sikh gurus. I've just got some additional photos here. So later on, we'll be speaking to Dharan, who's his teamwork with Sikh Museum Initiative have created these photos as well, which just kind of highlight how beautiful this object is.